The scorching summer sun beat down mercilessly on Bethany Jenkins' bent back as she struggled with the plow, her calloused hands gripping the wooden handles so tightly her knuckles turned white. 6 months a widow, and the wheat field that had once been her husband's pride now threatened to be her undoing. Albuquerque, New Mexico Territory, 1879, was no place for a woman alone, especially not one trying to manage 40 acres with nothing but determination and fading strength. Bethany wiped sweat from her brow, leaving a streak of dirt across her forehead. She'd been at it since dawn, desperate to finish plowing before the rare storm clouds gathering on the horizon delivered their precious moisture to the parched earth. 3 more rows and she'd be done. Just 3 more. The mule strained against the harness, sensing its owner's fatigue. Bethany clicked her tongue, urging the animal forward as black spots danced at the edges of her vision. "Come on, Samson," she whispered, her voice dry as the dust beneath her feet. "Just a little further." From atop his chestnut gelding half a mile away, Owen Mitchell spotted the lone figure in the field. He'd ridden this way deliberately, telling himself it was simply a shortcut back to his own ranch, 5 miles north. The truth was he'd been finding excuses to pass by the Jenkins place ever since Thomas Jenkins had been laid to rest in the spring. He watched as the woman behind the plow stumbled, caught herself, then continued on with stubborn resolve. Owen frowned, shifting in his saddle. It wasn't right, a woman doing a man's work like that. He'd offered help before, but Bethany Jenkins had politely refused, those striking blue eyes of hers flashing with pride even as exhaustion lined her young face. At 32, Owen had learned when to push and when to hang back. Widows, especially fresh ones, were entitled to their pride. But as he watched her faltering steps, something told him today was a day to push. He had just nudged his horse forward when he saw her collapse, crumpling to the ground beside the plow as if her strings had been cut. "Damn it," Owen muttered, digging his heels into his horse's flanks. The gelding sprang forward, eating up the distance between them in seconds. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped, boots hitting the earth with a thud as he raced to Bethany's side. She lay motionless, her face ashen beneath the tan. A trickle of blood ran from where her temple had struck a rock. The mule stood patiently in its traces, ears flicking at flies accustomed to waiting. Owen knelt beside her, his shadow falling across her face. "Mrs. Jenkins, Bethany." He touched her shoulder gently, then checked her pulse. Strong, thank God. Bethany's eyelids fluttered, then opened slowly. For a moment, confusion clouded her gaze before recognition dawned. "Mr. Mitchell," she whispered, attempting to sit up. "What, easy now," he said, supporting her back. "You collapsed, been pushing yourself too hard again." A flash of indignation crossed her features. "I was nearly finished." She glanced toward the unfinished rows, distress evident in her eyes. "The rain's coming. I can see that." Owen looked up at the darkening sky, then back at the pale woman. "How about you let me finish those rows while you rest a spell, then I'll help you back to the house." "I couldn't ask, you didn't ask, I offered." His voice was firm but kind, "and frankly, Mrs. Jenkins, you don't look in any condition to refuse." Bethany stared at him for a long moment, then gave a small nod, the simple movement seeming to tax her remaining strength. "Thank you." Owen helped her to a nearby cottonwood, making sure she was settled in its shade before returning to the abandoned plow. The mule regarded him warily as he approached, but soon accepted the stranger's commands. Owen had been plowing fields since he was 12. His hands found their familiar places on the handles, and he set to work. From her spot beneath the tree, Bethany watched the tall cowboy guide her plow with practiced ease. The muscles in his back and shoulders strained against his cotton shirt as he worked, moving with a rhythm and efficiency she could never match, no matter how hard she tried. Part of her bristled at accepting help, at the implied admission that she couldn't manage on her own. But another part, the honest part, knew she had reached her limits. Thomas had been gone only half a year, taken by a winter fever that had swept through the territory. They'd had 10 good years together, building this farm from nothing. No children had blessed their union, though not for lack of trying. Now, at 28, Bethany found herself alone with a farm too big for one person and too precious to abandon. The first fat raindrops began to fall as Owen completed the final row. The mule twitched its ears in annoyance, but Owen's soothing voice calmed the animal as he unhitched it from the plow. Leading both the mule and his horse, he returned to where Bethany sat. "Perfect timing," he said with a slight smile, extending his hand to help her up. "Let's get you home before this turns into a downpour." The touch of his calloused palm against hers sent an unexpected warmth through Bethany's tired body. She hadn't been touched by a man since Thomas fell ill, hadn't realized how much she missed that simple human contact. Embarrassed by her reaction, she quickly withdrew her hand once she was standing. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Mitchell, but I can manage from here." Her voice sounded stiff even to her own ears. Owen's hazel eyes studied her face, noting the paleness that remained despite her proud words. "I don't doubt your capabilities, Mrs. Jenkins, but that cut on your head needs tending, and this storm's about to break loose. Allow me to see you safely home." As if to emphasize his point, thunder rolled across the sky and the scattered raindrops became a steady patter. Bethany hesitated, then nodded. "Very well." They walked together toward the modest farmhouse, Owen leading both animals while keeping a watchful eye on Bethany's unsteady gait. By the time they reached the barn, rain was coming down in sheets, and they were both soaked through. "Let me help with the animals," Owen insisted after they'd sheltered inside. "You get yourself to the house and out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." Bethany's cheeks flushed at his words, though she knew he meant nothing improper by them. "The mule's stall is the third one down. There's feed in the bin by the door. I'll manage," Owen assured her. "Go on now." She wanted to argue to prove she wasn't weak, but her legs were trembling with exhaustion and the throbbing in her temple was growing worse. With a grateful nod, Bethany made her way through the rain to the farmhouse. Inside, she peeled off her sodden dress and changed into her one other good day dress, a simple blue cotton that Thomas had always said matched her eyes. She was just stoking the fire in the stove when a knock came at the door. Owen stood on her porch, nearly as drenched as she had been, rainwater dripping from the brim of his hat. "Animals are settled," he reported. "Your mule was mighty grateful for the dry stall and fresh hay. Thank you." Bethany hesitated, propriety warring with gratitude. A respectable widow didn't invite an unmarried man into her home, but leaving her benefactor standing in the rain seemed the height of ingratitude. "Would you like to come in and dry off? I can offer coffee while you wait out the worst of the storm." Relief flickered across Owen's face. "That's mighty kind of you, Mrs. Jenkins." She stepped back, allowing him to enter. "Please call me Bethany. After today, formality seems rather pointless." A smile touched the corners of his mouth as he removed his hat. "Only if you'll call me Owen." Bethany nodded, suddenly aware of how intimate her small house felt with his large presence filling it. "The coffee will take a few minutes. There's a blanket on the chair there if you'd like to dry off." As she busied herself with the coffee pot, Bethany was intensely conscious of Owen removing his wet jacket and draping it over a chair near the stove. She hadn't been alone with a man other than her husband inside this house before. The impropriety of it struck her, but what choice did she have? The man had likely saved her from lying in that field until the storm passed or worse. "That cut needs cleaning," Owen said, breaking into her thoughts. Bethany's hand went to her temple, coming away with flakes of dried blood. "It's nothing." "Head wounds always bleed something fierce," he agreed, "but they can turn bad if not tended." He glanced around the small kitchen. "Do you have a clean cloth and some whiskey?" "Whiskey," she echoed, surprised. "Best thing for cleaning a wound. My father was a doctor before we came west." There was something in his tone that suggested a story there, but he didn't elaborate. Bethany fetched a clean cloth from a drawer and, after a moment's hesitation, retrieved the half-empty bottle of whiskey from the cabinet where it had sat untouched since Thomas's death. "Here," she said, setting both on the table, "but really it's just a scratch." Owen dipped the cloth in water from the pitcher on the counter, then added a splash of whiskey. "Humor me," he said, gesturing for her to sit. With a sigh, Bethany complied, tilting her face up as Owen leaned down to examine the cut. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he cleaned away the dirt and dried blood. She winced when the alcohol stung the open wound. "Sorry," he murmured, his breath warm against her cheek. "Almost done." Bethany found herself studying his face as he worked the fan of lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting in the sun. The slight bend in his nose that suggested it had been broken once. The trimmed beard that framed a mouth given to easy smiles. He was handsome in a weathered, capable way that had nothing to do with conventional good looks and everything to do with character. "There," he said, straightening. "Should heal clean now. Thank you." Bethany rose to check on the coffee, needing to put some distance between them. Her reaction to his proximity was unsettling, a warm flutter in her stomach that she hadn't felt since her courting days with Thomas. Outside, the rain continued to pound on the roof, punctuated by occasional thunder. Bethany poured 2 cups of coffee and placed one before Owen, who had seated himself at her small kitchen table. "How long have you been trying to work that farm alone?" he asked after taking a sip. Bethany stared into her cup. "Since Thomas died in February. No family to help." She shook her head. "Thomas's people are back east. Mine are scattered, what's left of them. My brother's in California chasing gold." Owen nodded, understanding all too well the isolation of frontier life. "It's a lot of land for one person." "It's all I have," Bethany said, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "Thomas and I built this place from nothing. I won't lose it." "I wasn't suggesting you should," Owen replied calmly. "But there's no shame in accepting help, Bethany. Even the strongest among us need a hand sometimes." She looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "Is that what you're offering? A hand, if you'll take it?" He set down his cup. "I've got a couple of men who work for me, good, honest fellows. I could spare one of them to help with the planting for a few days. And I'd be willing to lend a hand myself when I can." "I can't pay much, I'm not asking for payment," Owen interrupted. "Just be a good neighbor." Bethany frowned. "Charity, then?" A smile touched Owen's lips. "No, call it an investment. This territory needs good farmers like you, and—" He hesitated, then continued more softly. "Thomas was a good man. He'd have done the same for any neighbor in need." The mention of her husband brought unexpected tears to Bethany's eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. "Yes, he would have." After a pause, she added, "Your offer is very kind. Perhaps we could work out some arrangement, eggs or vegetables in exchange when the garden comes in." Owen's smile broadened. "That sounds fair." He glanced at the window, where the rain was finally beginning to slacken. "Looks like I should be heading back before the trail gets too muddy." Bethany followed his gaze, surprised to find herself reluctant to see him go. "Of course, thank you again for your help today." They both stood. Owen reached for his still damp jacket and hat. "I'll send Jose over tomorrow morning if that suits you. He's good with planting." "That would be fine," Bethany said, walking him to the door. She hesitated, then added, "And perhaps you might stop by yourself sometime to check on the progress." Something warmed in Owen's eyes. "I'd like that very much." After he left, Bethany stood in the doorway watching until his tall figure disappeared into the gray curtain of rain. The house felt suddenly empty without his presence, but for the first time since Thomas's death, the emptiness felt temporary rather than permanent. True to his word, Owen sent Jose the next morning, a quiet, skilled young man who worked diligently alongside Bethany to plant the wheat. Over the following weeks, Owen himself appeared regularly, often bringing small gifts: a basket of early apples from his orchard, a jar of honey from his hives, once even a bolt of pretty calico he'd picked up in town, claiming his housekeeper had ordered too much for curtains. Each visit lasted a little longer than the one before. Bethany found herself looking forward to the sight of him riding up her lane, taking more care with her appearance on days when she thought he might come. They talked easily about crops and weather at first, then gradually about deeper things. Books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they still harbored. She learned that Owen had come west with his father after his mother died, that his father had given up medicine after losing his wife to illness he couldn't cure, that Owen had built his ranch from scratch after his father's death 10 years earlier. That despite his success, he ate most of his meals alone, his ranch house big and empty except for his housekeeper, Mrs. Tate, who came by days. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Ohio, about meeting Thomas at a church social when she was 17, about their journey west with little more than hope and determination. She even shared her disappointment at not having children, a confession that slipped out one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. "Thomas always said God had other plans for us," she said softly, "but I've wondered if maybe there was something wrong with me." Owen's hand covered hers briefly. "There's nothing wrong with you, Bethany. Sometimes life just takes different turns than we expect." By late summer, the wheat field that had nearly been her undoing stood tall and golden, a testament to collaborative effort. On the day they began to harvest, neighbors from miles around arrived to help, a tradition in farming communities. Bethany watched in amazement as wagons rolled up her lane, bringing families with scythes and baskets and covered dishes. "Did you arrange this?" she asked Owen, who stood beside her, grinning at her surprise. "Might have mentioned to a few folks that your wheat was ready," he admitted, "but they'd have come anyway. That's what neighbors do." The harvest became something of a celebration. Men swung scythes in rhythm while women gathered and bundled the cut wheat. Children chased each other through the stubble, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. At midday, tables were set up under the cottonwoods, laden with food contributed by each family. Bethany found herself seated beside Mrs. Larson, a forthright woman in her 50s whose farm lay to the east. "Nice to see Owen Mitchell smiling again," the older woman remarked, nodding toward where Owen stood chatting with some of the men. "Been too serious since he came back from that cattle drive last year." Bethany followed her gaze. "He seems in good spirits today." Mrs. Larson gave her a knowing look. "Only time I've seen him smile these past months is when he's talking about you or heading this way." Heat rose in Bethany's cheeks. "We're neighbors helping each other, that's all." "Hum," Mrs. Larson hummed skeptically. "Well, whatever you call it, it's done you both good. You've got color in your cheeks again, and he's not working himself to death trying to avoid an empty house." The woman's words stayed with Bethany throughout the afternoon. She caught herself watching Owen more closely, the easy way he interacted with the children, his quiet authority when organizing the work, the respect other men showed him. And she noticed how often his eyes sought her out across the field, how his smile softened when their gazes met. As evening approached and the last of the wheat was bundled, families began to depart with promises to return when it was time to thresh. Soon only Owen remained, helping Bethany store the bundles that would be processed over the coming days. "I can't thank you enough," she said as they closed the barn door, "for everything." Owen turned to her, his face serious in the fading light. "You don't need to thank me. These past months being around you, helping here, it's given me something I didn't know I was missing." Bethany's heart quickened. "What's that?" "Purpose, connection." He took a step closer. "Hope," the word hung between them, fragile and full of possibility. Bethany found herself unable to look away from his earnest gaze. "Owen, I know it's too soon," he interrupted gently. "Thomas hasn't been gone a year, and I respect your mourning, but I wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." Tears pricked at Bethany's eyes, not of sadness, but of something more complex: gratitude, tenderness, and the unexpected joy of second chances. "I don't know what the future holds," she admitted, "but I do know that having you in my life these past months has made it brighter." Owen's smile was tender as he reached out hesitantly to brush a strand of hair from her face. "That's enough for now," he said softly. They walked back to the house together, a comfortable silence between them filled with unspoken possibilities. Autumn came to New Mexico territory in a blaze of color. The wheat was threshed and sold at a good price, enough to see Bethany through the winter with some to spare. Owen continued his visits, helping with repairs to the barn roof and the house's north wall before winter set in. On a crisp November evening, exactly 9 months after Thomas's passing, Owen arrived with a special dinner prepared by Mrs. Tate and a small bunch of late-blooming wildflowers. "I thought you might like a night off from cooking," he explained as he unloaded the basket on her kitchen table. Bethany smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. It smells wonderful. They ate by lamplight, talking comfortably about Owen's plans to expand his cattle herd in the spring and Bethany's idea to plant a larger vegetable garden. I was thinking, Owen said as they finished the apple pie misses. Tate had included that if you planted along your southern field, you'd have better protection from the wind, and the soil there seemed richer when we were repairing fences last month. That's a good idea, Bethany agreed, though it would mean clearing some brush first. I could help with that, he offered immediately. Bethany regarded him thoughtfully. You've been helping me for months now. Don't you have your own ranch to run? I do, Owen acknowledged with a smile, and it's running well. My foreman, Frank, handles most things these days. Still, she persisted, you're here more often than not. People must be talking. Let them talk. Owen's gaze was steady. Unless it bothers you, Bethany considered this. She was well aware of the whispers, the young widow and the bachelor rancher. But she found, somewhat to her surprise, that she didn't care. No, she said finally, it doesn't bother me. Something shifted in Owen's expression, relief followed by determination. He reached across the table to take her hand. Bethany, I've been wanting to ask you something. Her pulse quickened. Yes. These past months, getting to know you, seeing your strength and your kindness, it's been the greatest joy of my life. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I know you're still healing. I know Thomas will always have a place in your heart. But I was hoping you might find room there for me too. Tears welled in Bethany's eyes, but they were tears of happiness, not grief. Owen Mitchell, are you asking what I think you're asking? He smiled, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small ring with a single pearl set in gold. I'm asking if you'd consider becoming my wife, not to replace what you had with Thomas, but to build something new together. Bethany looked at the ring, then at the man holding it, this good man who had come into her life when she most needed help, but had stayed for much more meaningful reasons. Thomas would always be her first love, but life was offering her a second chance at happiness. Yes, she said softly, then more firmly, yes, I would be honored to be your wife. Owen's face broke into a smile that outshone the lamplight. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then raised her hand to his lips. You've made me the happiest man in the territory. They were married on Christmas Day in the small church in Albuquerque, with neighbors and friends filling the pews. Mrs. Larson dabbed at her eyes throughout the ceremony, later declaring to anyone who would listen that she'd known all along where things were headed. The question of where they would live was resolved when Owen suggested combining their operations, his cattle ranch and her farm, into one larger property. We'll keep both houses, he said. Yours for when we're working the fields, mine for the rest of the time, and we'll build a new one eventually that's truly ours together. Spring found them planting the southern field together, side by side as they worked the soil that would support their shared future. When Bethany straightened to ease her back, Owen was there with a canteen of water and a concerned glance. Not overdoing it, are you? He asked. You've seemed tired lately. Bethany smiled, a secret joy warming her from within. She'd been waiting for the right moment to tell him. Actually, there's a reason for that. Owen's brow furrowed. Are you ill? No, she laughed, taking his hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach. I'm carrying your child. The wonder that spread across Owen's face was something Bethany knew she would remember all her days. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material on earth. A baby, he whispered against her hair. Our baby. In that moment, standing in the field that had once brought her to her knees with exhaustion, Bethany felt the fullness of life's unexpected blessings. The land that had nearly broken her had led her to this man, this love, this future unfolding before them like the endless New Mexico sky. Their son was born the following winter, a strong, healthy boy they named Thomas Owen Mitchell, honoring both the past and the present. He grew into a curious, lively child with his mother's blue eyes and his father's easy smile, the first of 3 children who would fill their home with laughter and purpose. As the years passed, Bethany sometimes thought back to that sweltering day when she'd collapsed in the field, how close she'd come to losing everything. Instead, that moment of weakness had opened the door to her greatest strength, the courage to begin again, to accept help, to love after loss. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took her back to that same field, now part of their prosperous combined property. In the soft light of sunset, he pulled her close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly, saying yes to a nosy neighbor who couldn't mind his own business. Bethany laughed, leaning into his embrace. "That nosy neighbor saved more than my wheat field that day," she replied, raising her face for his kiss. "He saved me, and I've been thankful every day since." Above them, the vast New Mexico sky painted itself in shades of gold and crimson, a fitting backdrop to a love story that, like the land itself, had weathered hardship to reveal unexpected beauty, a love born in exhaustion and kindness, nurtured through seasons of change and blooming still with each passing year.